She was about to walk out hungry, until her little girl looked at a stranger's plate. She had already taken 2 quiet steps toward the door when the little girl stopped walking. It was such a small thing, so small no one else in the crowded diner noticed. But he did. He noticed the way the child's tiny fingers tightened around her mother's sleeve, the way her eyes lingered, wide and unblinking, on the half-finished plate of food sitting in front of him. It wasn't curiosity. It wasn't even longing in the usual sense. It was hunger, the kind that sits quietly, politely, like it has learned not to ask. And in that moment, everything changed. Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of small human moments, take a second to like, comment, share, and subscribe. You never know who might need a story like this today. The diner was loud that evening, filled with the clatter of plates, the hum of conversations, and the smell of warm food that wrapped around people like comfort. He had come there out of habit, not hunger. It had been 3 weeks since his life had fallen apart in a way he never saw coming, and routine was the only thing holding him together. He sat alone, staring more at his thoughts than his food, barely noticing the people around him, until he noticed her. She had walked in carefully, like someone trying not to be seen. Her clothes were clean but worn, her face tired in a way that sleep alone couldn't fix. She held her daughter's hand gently, as if she were holding on to the only thing she had left in the world. They didn't sit. Instead, she approached the counter, spoke softly to the cashier, then hesitated. He couldn't hear what she said, but he saw the subtle shake of her head afterward, the forced smile, the quiet apology in her eyes. Whatever she had asked for, she couldn't afford it. And so she turned to leave, quietly, without making a scene, without asking anyone for help. That's when the little girl stopped. Her gaze drifted across the diner and landed on his plate. A simple meal, still half untouched. Her eyes didn't beg, they didn't plead, they just stayed there, still, hopeful, hungry. The man followed her gaze down to his food, then back to her face. Something inside him tightened, something uncomfortable and familiar. He had seen that look before, not in others but in himself, years ago, when life had been harder, when pride had been the only thing he had left. The mother noticed it too. She gently tugged the child's hand, whispering something softly, urging her to move. The girl hesitated for just a second longer before looking down, as if ashamed of something she couldn't control. That was when he stood up. It wasn't dramatic. No one clapped. No music swelled in the background. It was just a quiet decision made in a quiet moment. He picked up his plate and walked toward them. The mother stiffened when she saw him approaching, her guard immediately rising. Life had taught her to expect judgment before kindness, suspicion before generosity. But his face didn't carry either. He simply knelt slightly to be at the child's level and gently placed the plate on a nearby table. Then he stepped back. He didn't say much, just a few simple words about how he had ordered too much and didn't want it to go to waste. His tone carried no pity, no superiority, just truth, or at least a version of it that preserved dignity. The mother hesitated. You could see the war happening inside her, pride against need, protection against exhaustion, the instinct to refuse against the reality that her child hadn't eaten properly in days. The little girl didn't speak. She just looked up at her mother. That was enough. Slowly, reluctantly, the woman nodded. Her hands trembled slightly as she guided her daughter to the table. She thanked him quietly, her voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking louder might shatter the fragile moment. He gave a small nod and returned to his seat, but he didn't start eating again. Instead, he watched them, not in a way that invaded, but in a way that cared. He saw the little girl's careful excitement, the way she tried not to eat too fast, as if afraid the food might disappear. He saw the mother watching her, not eating at first, just watching. Like that sight alone was enough to fill her. She took a bite too, and something in his chest cracked open, because he realized sitting there in that noisy diner that this quiet act had given him something he hadn't felt in weeks: purpose. 3 weeks earlier he had lost his job. 2 weeks ago he had lost the apartment that came with it. And just days ago he had lost the relationship he thought would survive anything. He had come to the diner that night not because he wanted food, but because he didn't want to feel alone. And yet somehow, in helping someone else, he had found something steadier than comfort. He had found connection. When they finished eating, the mother stood again, her posture still cautious but lighter somehow. She walked over to him, her daughter beside her, and thanked him properly this time. There was strength in her voice now, even if it was quiet. She didn't tell her story. She didn't need to. He could see it in the way she carried herself, in the way she held her child close, in the way she had tried to leave without asking for anything. But before she turned to go, the little girl did something unexpected. She reached out and hugged him. It was quick, shy, almost hesitant, but it was real. And it stayed with him long after they walked out the door. Days passed. He thought about them more than he expected to, not in a heavy way, but in a quiet, persistent way, like a memory that refuses to fade because it means something. He started looking at people differently. At the grocery store, at the bus stop, in the streets, he began to notice the small things, the tired faces, the quiet struggles, the moments where someone needed help but didn't know how to ask, and slowly he began to change. Not in grand, dramatic ways, but in small, consistent ones. He shared what he could, he listened more, he judged less. And something incredible happened. Life began to respond. Opportunities he hadn't expected started to appear. A temporary job turned into something stable. A connection led to another. It wasn't magic, it wasn't instant, but it was real. And through it all, he carried that moment in the diner with him. Weeks later, on a cold evening, he found himself walking past the same diner again. He almost didn't go in. But something made him stop. Inside, the diner looked the same noise, the same warmth, the same quiet stories unfolding at every table. And then he saw them, the mother and her daughter. This time, they were sitting. They had their own table, their own plates of food. The little girl was smiling, really smiling, and the mother looked different, still tired maybe, but stronger, like someone who had found a small piece of solid ground after a long time drifting. When they noticed him, recognition lit up their faces instantly. The little girl waved enthusiastically. The mother stood and walked over, her steps more confident now. This time she told him a little of her story. Not everything, just enough. Enough to let him know that things had been hard, that they still were. But that one small act, one simple moment of kindness, had reminded her that the world wasn't as cold as it sometimes felt, that it had given her just enough hope to keep going, and that sometimes hope is all you need to take the next step. They didn't stay long. Life doesn't pause for moments like these, but as they left, the little girl turned back one last time and smiled at him, the kind of smile that stays with you long after it's gone. If this story touched your heart even a little, take a moment to like, share, and comment. You never know whose life you might impact by spreading something this simple. And before we reach the end, here's something special. Comment, kindness still exists if you believe small acts can change lives, because sometimes they really do. He sat there for a long time after they left, staring at the empty chair across from him. But this time it didn't feel empty. It felt full of meaning, full of connection, full of the quiet, undeniable truth that even in a world that can feel overwhelming and harsh, kindness still finds its way through. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in moments so small they almost go unnoticed, unless you're paying attention. Like a little girl standing still in a crowded diner, staring at a plate of food, and a man who simply chose to notice